This is episode number 194 of the Mixology Talk podcast, and today we're going to be talking to Whit Regali of Misadventure Vodka around sustainability and distilling, and the approach that he takes is very unique. I've never heard of this before, so stay tuned. Everyone, welcome back to the Mixology Talk podcast. Today, we're going to have a different conversation about sustainability. I'm excited, and I haven't heard this kind of approach or kind of focus with sustainability. So today, we have a special guest, Whit Regali from Misadventure Vodka. How you doing, Whit?
Good, how are you?
Good. I'm hoping I did not butcher the name. I have a track record of doing that.
Oh, you nailed it.
Yeah! All right. Perfect. So thank you so much for joining me. I came across your website and your spirit because I was doing some research on vodka, and the way you're producing stuff is really crazy and cool. And we're going to get into that in a second. But could you kind of talk a little bit about what got you started in distilling, and then we'll talk a little bit more about your product and kind of why you're going the direction you're going.
Absolutely. Yeah. I guess distilling or like kind of alcohol is kind of runs in the family for me a little bit. My great grandfather was a bootlegger, and I'm not sure if he's a good or a bad bootlegger. He got shot in the ass by the mob because of it. So, you guys can make a decision on that. But when I moved from Massachusetts to California after I graduated college, I ended up moving to Mammoth and waited tables and started bartending. And this is back in 2006. And this was the first time I actually got to see craft beer and craft brewing. That didn't really exist in the East Coast at the time. And I had no idea you could make alcohol for a living. When I saw that, it just kind of blew my mind. And through bartending, I saw that no one was really touching distilling, and I always thought it was a romantic kind of thing. And so I started reading up on it and doing experiments and quotes in the garage, and that kind of just slowly snowballed from there. It was when I met my business partner Sam that he was the perfect yin to my yang, that we started talking about how we do this in a sustainable way as well. Mm-hmm. And that's when things got really exciting.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of the focus of much of what we're talking about, because, sustainability has been a conversation in craft cocktails for quite a few years now. I think we're always learning new things, new techniques, new ways to kind of lessen the footprint that we have on the planet. But that's, like I said, that's what really interests me in your product here. So can you tell us a little bit about your approach to distilling, and more importantly, kind of like why you guys do what you do? Because it can't be easy.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy. But it is gratifying. It's a lot of fun. It's when people hear about what we do, and then when they finally get it, seeing that kind of like recognition in their face is wonderful. But to answer your question, kind of why we do what we do and kind of how we got started. We were always trying to find a way. Originally, we were going to put whiskey in reused wine bottles, but as a small company with no money, the idea of waiting for our whiskey to age 4 years and not see any revenues wasn't the best business model. And so we needed something that was going to be a little, take like a week to 10 days to make. And so we started looking at white spirits like vodkas and gins and rums. And this is back in 2015, 16. And during that time, the Natural Resource Defense Council came out with a study talking about how much food that we waste globally. Mm-hmm. And that's actually 40% of all food that we grow remains uneaten and ends up in a landfill. And when you think about, all of the land and the water and the resources to grow those crops, those are wasted as well. The transportation, the packaging, And then once food ends up in a landfill, it actually decomposes into methane, which is 25 times more damaging as a greenhouse gas than CO2. And so kind of seeing this big, massive problem, we kind of asked ourselves, like, is there something we could do about this? And when we started kind of looking at the different food groups that like had the most waste, baked goods in particular is one of those things that even though it's donated to the food banks, because it doesn't have a lot of nutritional value to it, it doesn't get given to the needy. It's loaded with starches and sugars. And so as an alcohol maker, those are the things you want to make alcohol. But again, this is being tossed away. And so that was our big light bulb moment. Like, could we actually take, these cupcakes and Twinkies and Ho-Hos and turn this into a beverage alcohol? And so that question led us on like a 2-year journey where we worked in other distilleries. The California Spirits Company in particular in San Marcos was kind of like an incubator for us. They were nice enough to allow us to kind of just do our experiments. And so after 2 years in some proprietary processes, we nailed it and have came out with our first product, which is a Misadventure vodka. Mm-hmm. It's the first vodka in the world to be made from surplus baked goods that we get from food banks.
That's so crazy and so cool, and on so many levels. I mean, once you talk about that report and how those downstream effects really do make a huge impact on our planet, I think using the food, the surplus food as your source, it just has so much more benefit to it. So can you kind of counter or talk about traditional way of making vodka and then kind of contrast it to how this is applied? Like it seems like you get to jumpstart a couple of processes because you have all this starch, you have potentially sugar. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we can't jumpstart stuff. There is actually we've had to kind of invent our own way of doing certain aspects of it. But traditionally, you make vodka like you're making any other beverage alcohol, like you're making beer or wine or whiskey. You are taking your fermentable ingredients such as corn or barley. Traditionally with vodka, it's potatoes and rye. Mm-hmm. And that is only because potatoes and rye grew really well in Russia and Poland. As a side note, vodka and in all spirits in general are really like a byproduct of farming. Whatever grew really well in that region, the farmers would sell at the markets, and what didn't sell, they would still try to extract value from it by distilling it. That preserved it, but also allowed you to turn to something else. And so depending what region you're in, if you're in Kentucky where corn was subsidizing really well, all of a sudden bourbon comes along. If you're in Russia and Poland, where potatoes and rye grew really well, then that's where the kind of basis of vodka comes from. Sure. Now, vodka can be made from anything, as many know, but for us, yes, we don't use those traditional products, and so we'll take our baked goods. The first hard thing that we do, which is different from everybody else, is that our baked goods come in all different packages. They're still wrapped in plastic. If it's in a bread, it's in a clamshell cupcake or a cake thing. We have to manually take and separate all of that. We have a machine coming in pretty soon. It's going to do it for us. But that's one of the big things right there. We can't, like normally you would just order, a big pallet of potatoes or a big pallet of rye. We don't have the luxury of doing that. We're kind of at the whim of what's at the food bank. And fortunately for us, there's lots of it, which is an unfortunate situation for all of us because there's lots of it. So we never really run out. So we'll take all those baked goods, we'll break it down, heat it up to above pasteurization temp. So if there's anything if there hypothetically was any kind of bacteria on there, that would kill that.
Sure.
And then we will then pitch it with a special yeast and throw some enzymes in there, and then let it ferment.
Sure.
And as it's fermenting, that's just like any other process. And then from there, we've had to build our own still because we couldn't afford a brand new one. And so that contributes to our own kind of unique taste, and helps us do what we do, because making vodka, the initial capital outlay for that is pretty expensive. So making ourselves saves a lot of money.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And that's the thing that really caught my eye was just, the source product that you have is so unique and so different, and it's a cool thing. And we talked about this beforehand, but like the movement with Trash Tiki, this is the first time it kind of really caught into, I think, popular cocktail bar scenario, and they were doing something, not similar, but they were going to pastry shops in their local areas and coffee shops and saving the grinds from the coffee of the day before, any kind of excess food that was left, and incorporating it into their cocktail program in every city they kind of entered. And I think it started this really cool conversation within our community of craft cocktail bartenders of like, all right, now what? Now what else can we do? And so seeing somebody take that to the next level and say, okay, let's make something with it now. Let's make something really cool that we can incorporate, in a bottle form is just really, really fun to see.
Absolutely. I think, with the Trash Tiki, the cool aspect about that is that you're taking local ingredients, and that's a big aspect of sustainability is finding what's around you, and utilizing that. And the best part about that as well is that you get to make depending on where you live in the world, you're going to have different plants and herbs available to you, and stuff you can forage that you might not even find, say from your local supplier, that you can go find yourself, maybe even partnering up with local stewardship groups or gleaning organizations. And, you could get some really unique ingredients and flavor profiles from what you have around you.
Sure, absolutely. And you mentioned stewardship groups and foraging. Let's say a bartender is listening to this now and they're like, oh, that's a really cool idea. How do I find them? Like, what would you type into the Google to figure that, to look for? You could type in your city or town and then, foraging or something.
Yeah. Stewardship. One of the things I would type in actually is gleaning, GLEANING, gleaning. It's an age-old practice of picking from farms fruits and vegetables that have fallen to the ground that are still good. Sure. Traditionally, it was given back to the needy, but there's so many here in San Diego. There's so many ornamental farms around that have thousands of pounds of citrus and produce that they don't pick. And so there's, for example, here we have a organization called Produce Good that goes around and picks these and gives these to the needy, to the food bank. During COVID times, they tripled or quadrupled their normal pickups and deliveries.
Wow.
It's amazing what this organization's done. And we work with them as well because they have so much. And we're trying to figure out how can we incorporate this not only in cocktails, but maybe into, specialty liqueurs in the future.
Sure, absolutely. And I think that makes a ton of sense. Perfect. So if somebody's listening to this, the first thing to look up would be gleaning, and if there's something local or some kind of organization that kind of supports it within any market.
Yeah. And I'd also just go to your farmers too. You can learn so much by talking to them about what's in season, the right time to pick things, and what's around you in general. Sure. You could also look up just foraging groups, because the foraging groups are going to have a lot of information about what's available. And it's good to maybe take a class, because I took one of those classes, and one of the things they teach you is like, which I didn't know, but it makes sense, is like you want to forage first of all in the right areas, but you don't want to forage near roads or highways, because all of those plants soak up the CO2 and all the smog from those cars. And so if you use those in a cocktail, you're going to extract that stuff out and you're going to poison the people.
Right.
So like make sure you take a class and really interact with these people, not just get a book and go outside.
Yeah, and I think this is really important too. Is like I think safety first for all things,
Yes.
but especially with foraging, because that can really be some dangerous stuff you're talking about. With experimenting on. So having somebody to lean on for answers and guiding you in the right direction, I think is really, really critical.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Very cool. So you talked a little bit about the product and kind of how you guys are so different, and most importantly, why. Can you talk a little bit about? I saw on your website you use a term which I'm really interested in, because I think it has some explaining to do, and I'm really curious about it. But you mentioned the word or the phrase hedonistic sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
That is just cool. What does that mean to you guys?
So, we've got that term from a Danish architect, and the idea behind that is trying to make sustainability accessible and fun and enjoyable, as opposed to kind of what it was in the past, where you're asking to sacrifice something. In the past, sustainable products used to cost a lot. You'd have to pay $5-10 more for a sustainable product, or the quality wasn't there. I think we've all had those experiences with toothpastes or deodorants that are sustainable, but they don't work as good as the mass-produced counterparts.
Sure.
And then there's also the accessibility. A lot of these some of these sustainable companies just they're not there, and so they're not easy to get to. So what we try to do with Hedonistic Sustainability is make sustainability an easy choice and a fun choice. So it's so if you have a choice between a mass-produced product and a sustainable product, as long as it has all those other aspects to it, we're trying to model all of our products like that, priced right, high quality, accessible, then why not choose the one that helps the world out as opposed to the one that's damaging the world and continuing these problems? Sure,
absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, when you're producing things and you have a focus on sustainability, not only yourself but all the industry in general, like spirits industry in general, what are some of the hardest aspects of really focusing on sustainability as not really a business model, but more of a driving ethos in a company? What are some of the roadblocks that you have to run through?
I think there's a couple of different answers to that. Depending on what kind of company you're in. So if you're in a craft size company like ours, there's not a lot of sustainable products available that can help you out with your process. You really have to be kind of inventing your own processes to do things sustainably. Everything that's around you is kind of made for mass production. So, and that being said, if you're going to be inventing things yourself, that's going to cost money. And then if it's a startup, that's the one thing that generally you don't have,
Right.
And then from the spirits industry in general, you gotta imagine that most of the product on the shelves are made by giant companies and giant factories, and for them it's a scale issue. And so if these sustainable practices can't scale up and consumers aren't demanding that change, they're not going to make those changes in a way. You see a lot of positive changes happening in the industry now, and I think we're going to see a lot more in the future. I'd like it to happen more, and I think it could if bartenders and consumers made those conscious choices in a way, because that's how everything gets changed.
Right, absolutely. And I know there's different aspects of sustainability. I think there's, past, I think it was Hudson, the bourbon company up in New York, they're were one of the initial people really pushing sustainability, and their focus was power generation, and kind of closing the loop on production as much as they possibly could. And I know, the waste involved has also found its way into the food chain through feeding livestock and stuff like that. So, but those were the early days, probably 10 years ago, before people were really thinking in these ways. So I imagine it is really kind of like, what are you going to focus on and what makes sense for your business to focus on and still be able to scale, to your point.
Absolutely. Yeah. And those practices to get one of your points of giving some of your waste to farmers, that's actually happening kind of ubiquitously throughout the industry now. Here in San Diego, every brewery is donating their spent grains to local farmers. We take our spent grains and donate it to a compost facility here locally in Oceanside. So we're not wasting any of that. And so part of it is, trying to find look at your own excess and see how can you divert that or even monetize that in a way, and find different uses for it. Outside of, we have a little bar out front in the tasting room, and we have these kind of like tiki torch-esque kind of things on all our tables. And the fuel we use for that is all of our excess heads and tails from our distilling process.
That's cool.
So we're trying to utilize as much as we can.
Yeah, that's really cool. So as you kind of look in your space and your industry of spirit production, are there any other distilleries that are kind of taking really cool initiatives and innovative approaches to producing their products that you're just like, that's pretty cool. I'm pretty impressed in some of the stuff they're doing.
Well, I mean, there's one that it's common, and there's a couple of brands doing it. It's the those whey vodkas, WHEY. All those producers generally are getting that whey from essentially excess cheese making processes, yogurt and stuff like that. That costs those original producers a lot of money to throw away. Similar to food banks, when they're throwing away excess food, it actually costs the food banks money to throw that stuff away.
Sure.
And so by ourselves, and I assume these whey vodka producers, they're saving those people money. And so it's a great symbiotic relationship. It's kind of like we're all adding a caboose to the food system in a way. So I'm very excited about what's going on there. Obviously the people that are using local farms is a great way of doing it, as opposed to ordering their grains from others, the other side of the world or the country, because shipping is a major contributor to climate change.
Sure.
But in the long run, actually, using these excess ingredients is actually better for the environment than growing something new. So the way people are pretty awesome in my book.
Yeah, and I remember somebody, it was a couple of years ago, they were doing partnering with breweries to use their beer in whiskey, bad beer or something like that, and using that as their grain source for doing whiskey. I haven't seen it really catch on, but I don't think there's a lot of excess beer kind of running around these days either.
Well, yeah, that's true. There actually is, here in San Diego, there Henneberry whiskey actually. It's another Vista distillery up the street. They partner with some of the Vista breweries, and they come out with these specialty releases that you're really not going to see outside of their tasting room. But they're these beautifully, really cool whiskeys, made with blood orange IPA from Latitude 33, and whiskeys made from coffee porters, and just they're a small batch, but if you get your hands on them, they're super cool.
And you said it's Canterbury?
Henneberry, Hennebery.
Perfect. I'm definitely going to be looking them up because that just sounds delicious.
Yes. Yeah, they're good buddies of ours. The cool thing about the San Diego community, alcohol community, is everyone helps each other out, and so yeah, we're all friends with each other.
Excellent. We're gonna, I guess, go ahead and start wrapping this up now. But I'd love to see if there's any tips you have for either bartenders, home enthusiasts, restaurants in general, about some ways to be a little bit more sustainable or kind of think about sustainability a little bit differently in their practices.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably pretty common, but I'll mention it anyways. In craft bars, the idea of using all of your ingredients to the max,
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the rinds of the citrus and the innards and seeing like how many different ways can you extract value from that. Because the great thing about that is you're also saving your bar money. And so that's something that's actually pretty common throughout the industry, but it still has to be mentioned. The more that you can choose local products as opposed to products made someplace else is going to be a huge factor in how sustainable your bar program is. If you're ordering a whiskey shipped from Scotland, a malt whiskey shipped from Scotland, there's a huge carbon footprint on there simply from it being shipped over from Scotland. But there's lots of great American malt whiskeys here. And so thinking about can you supplement, some great local products for some of these mass-produced products would be another way of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, like what we talked about earlier, engaging your local community and seeing talk to anti-food waste and cleaning organizations, like what's out there that is excess that you could use in your bar program that, starts a conversation with people. Because even I think in the restaurant community, we in bar community, we're more aware of the food waste and the impact of that than consumers are. And so having a conversation with them about that is always going to be good. And you want to do that anyways, as a great bartender, like you want to be engaging your customers. And so, incorporating that with local, excess foods and things like that is a great way just to start a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it's not a matter of okay, well, I'm not going to choose this one from Scotland. I'm going to choose a whiskey from the United States or something even ideally more regional, like more close to your own proximity.
Mm-hmm.
It's not 100%, but it's better. It's a lot better.
Yep.
So even just kind of shrinking your circle of where you get produce from, where you get your spirits from, even that is better than just sourcing from all over the world. It sounds
absolutely
like carbon footprint.
And at the same time too, you're supporting local community.
Right.
You're making your community more vibrant. You're keeping the money inside there as opposed to having to ship all over the world. So there's a really positive thing when you are supporting and buying from your local community.
Yeah, and the thing I always say is you're building the robust economy of your community. So
Yep.
Instead of being so singular, I lived in Vegas, so I got to see firsthand what a downturn in the economy happens. Everybody lose your job because that one economy is so focused on gaming, for example. But they took a lot of measures to kind of diversify their job profiles. So now when economic, uncertainty comes, it doesn't have as big of an impact. And so the community's more braced for stuff like that. And I think this goes into that as well, is the more you can support your local community, the more you're building up the capabilities economically and providing new kind of opportunities around you. I think it just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, there's so many benefits. There's environmental benefits, there's financial benefits, there's just community wellness benefits. It really all is this great service. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. So perfect. I think this is the last question I have for you, I promise. But is there anything you'd like to promote? Obviously your website, which will include the show notes, but anything else you'd like to kind of put a shout out to?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's getting towards the holidays. We do have a Good Riddance 2020 gift pack that we're promoting. It's kind of like hitting all of the notes of 2020. So in it, we have our sustainable vodka, and next to it, in the same kind of value pack you can buy on our website, you can get hand sanitizer that we make as well. So, a little remembrance of what we all went through, and hopefully not have to go through again.
Oh gosh, yeah, that would be amazing. So perfect. And if anybody wanted to take a look at your social media, what's your favorite social media handle and platform?
You go to our Instagram. That's always a fun one. Misadventure Co. is the handle. We have a lot of fun stories of us actually distilling and goofing off in there, and generally, like, every season has a different baked good. Imagine like Valentine's Day has heart-shaped cakes, and Super Bowl has Super Bowl cakes, and so we do some fun things with all of those when the time comes. So yeah, it's an enjoyable page, and I'd love to have everyone come say what's up.
Perfect. So pumpkin spice something or other's coming up then, right? We're getting close to fall.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Too much of that.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you so much. We'll include links in the show notes over at mixologytalk.com / actually, I don't even know what episode this is going to be. Mixologytalk.com, and we'll put links in there for sure. So thanks again, Whit. And I'm going to have to stop by your distillery and enjoy some of your delicious vodka, man.
It was my pleasure. Great talking with you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you. So once again, thank you to Whit Regali for his time and his insights around distilling in a really new and kind of creative way. I can't wait to see what else he has up his sleeves as far as distillation and new products. But I think we'll just have to wait to see what happens there. But if this is interesting to you and you want to kind of help support people being in the space and moving forward with sustainability, there's one really good way to do that, and that is to support them. So definitely go check out his website over at misadventure.co and check out the show notes over at mixologytalk.com /194 for all the links we mentioned in the podcast here. So we'll have some more podcasts for you guys in the future. But until then, I hope everyone's staying safe and having a couple of great, hopefully sustainable cocktails in the future. Cheers.